I may as well. Okay, got Dave Schwartz here. Dave and I worked together way back in the day in Shreveport at KTAL. He's now with CARE, Weekend Sports, and does some news, right?
Yeah, I do. I also do. I'm the co-host for the Saturday morning show here.
Yeah, so that's what we have to talk about, just in terms of, something I always try to talk to people about is having a diverse set of skills, be able to do a little bit of everything. Because one, not only are you in a better position to succeed or stay where you are, but then one day, let's say a company has to make cuts and basically you're too valuable, when that time comes and you remain there while maybe people whose skills haven't developed or have slipped, those sorts of things, are the type of people who go. So talk about, I guess, the thought of, doing both, what you've learned from it and kind of how you've grown.
Well, I agree. It's a great way to stay employed. The more things that you can do, the less chance they have of getting rid of you, because they always need people who can wear a lot of different hats. This was proposed to me a year ago, and they said, would you be interested in doing this? And I'm always been the type of person who's wanted to kind of, grow my box of skills, so to speak. I don't like to be put in just one area and told, that I just can't talk about. I can only talk about sports, or I can only talk about this. So for me, it was a fun challenge to kind of really test my fundamentals of journalism. You don't always necessarily do that in sports. The rules are different. Writing is different. Everything's different. So for me, it was totally different. No matter how comfortable I was talking on air about sports, when it comes to doing sportscasts or live shots, when the prompter goes out or scripts are not there or something, I can talk. I could simply go for a couple of minutes and be fine. With news, it was totally different. And it made me start paying attention more to what was going on in the world, what was running during the week, how we were covering it, all those kind of things. And I got more vested in it, I think, too, just in our news product. Before, it was very much of a sports with blinders on and not paying attention to anything else. I'm still growing. I don't think I'm where I want to be yet when it comes to delivering news. There's a lot of variety to it, to the show, which is kind of fun. I mean, it's a lot of ad lib. So that part actually is surprisingly easy for me because of the way sports is. But when I have to sit behind the desk and read the news, that's where I'm still learning how to grow and trying to make sure that I'm familiar with what's going on during the week, so that when I get there, it's not all brand new to me.
Yeah. And how long have you been in the business overall?
I believe I'm coming up on I think this is my 15th year in the business.
And what's interesting, I find, is when you talk about reading, you still are trying to find your voice when it comes to news, because a lot of people you see, young, old, I mean, at any point in their career, it's so tough to take your normal voice and merge it with, that TV voice and not be the reporter, man, but be you. So something I work on.
I had to start all over, really, which was kind of weird. 14 years in the business, all of a sudden I had to start all over and figure out what my voice was for news, because it's very different. Sports is energy, it's fun, I don't really feel like I have, I've never wanted the TV voice. I just wanted to be me. But it's different. I mean, when you're doing news, talking about news and talking about sports are two very different things. Now, there are serious sports stories, but by and large, news, it's much more, it's much more serious. There's much less, or should be, I think, much less opinion in it. In sports, it lends itself to opinion and a little bit of a lean one way or the other. I think with news, you have to be very, very careful about what you're reading, how you're reading it, how you're saying it, because every word is so important as to not take a specific bias. I think that's one of the big things I had to adjust to.
Right. Talk a little bit about just other skills that you've, collected along the way and still utilize. Do you still shoot? Do you still edit your own stuff?
I edit regularly, often. I don't edit all the time. We have producers who edit stuff for our shows, but I will jump in every now and then pretty regularly, because sometimes it's just nice to be able to give someone you're working with a break and say, hey, I know you have 7 VOs to write and I'm not doing it, or to edit, and I have my show written already. Let me jump in and edit a couple things. So I do that. Or there's a time where maybe I'm not anchoring and we're scrambling because it's a big event and I'm in the office and they need someone to edit. And so I jump in and I start editing. It's like you said earlier, the more things you can do, the more valuable you are.
And that would be news too sometimes.
Yeah, I haven't had to edit much for our news show. I've offered, actually last Saturday morning, we had to have a soundbite cut, and I offered to do it because it was from a press conference that I'd been to the other day, and they said, no, just give the editor a time code.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay. And I'm the kind of person that I know how I like things. And so
Mm-hmm.
rather than try to get someone else to do them the way I like them, I'd just rather do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of took a lot for me to say, okay, here's the in cue and the out cue, and make sure you get it right here and right here. And the editor was kind of like, all right, I got it,
Yeah.
But I like things the way I like them. And if I'm going to toss to the soundbite, I want it to be in the right spot where I'm going to toss to it, so that the writing, it all makes sense and weaves a story. I do still shoot. It's sparingly. I don't shoot a lot, but when I went to the Olympics last year, I had to shoot.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure I kept my skills sharp. And a couple weeks and months leading up to it, I would grab a camera and go shoot a couple things every now and then, just to try to get sharp, because basically that was the only way I was going to go to the Olympics.
Right. And that's a great point there of, probably one of the reasons why you get the assignment is because you have the ability to shoot, edit, do stuff on social media, right?
Yeah, I mean that was basically the reason I went, because it wasn't even like I wasn't shooting packages. We had another guy there with me who would shoot kind of pretty featurey packages for us, because he was much better at it than I was. But I would be shooting, mix zone sound and things like that, and editing. And without being able to do those things, there was no way I was not going to go to the Olympics. So
yeah,
you just kind of figure out this is the way it is because you want to go.
Yeah. I'm not a Vikings fan, so following Dave Schwartz on Twitter can be tough sometimes. But that's obviously a big part of, I would say, your brand, and probably what sets you apart maybe from some other talent in that market. Maybe all talent does this, I don't know, but you're constantly interacting with viewers, even ones who I would say are flat out idiots in terms of their opinions. They're at least acknowledge them one way or another, engage in conversation. So how much, I guess, how much is social media a part of you and a part of your job and your brand now?
It's huge, and it's bigger for me because I make it bigger for me. Our social team and our web people and we get along real well, and we all see the value in that interaction, because I mean it doesn't take a lot to interact, and sometimes that interaction brings them over to television. Sometimes it brings them from television to Twitter. The idea is that you hope it's both. But any way you can grab a viewer, whether it's on this thing, the phone, or the television, or the internet, whatever it is, we got to grab a viewer you can get, and you got to hang on to them. And especially in sports, people just want their opinions heard, and sometimes they have questions, and sometimes they just want to get something off their chest, and they take it out on you, and that's fine. Especially with Vikings lose, people get really mad at me, and so I like to turn it around and have some fun with it, because I have a pretty thick skin, so it doesn't really very much. But I just think that, in essence, what we're doing specifically to sports, what talk radio does so well is, whoops, sorry, did I lose you?
It's all right,
What talk radio does so well is that they give people a platform to say what they want to say, be heard, and get a feedback on that. And so I try to do that on our social as much as I can.
So how do you balance all this? You have a family. You do sports, you do news, you have to go out and shoot stories, you have to do social media. I mean, do you feel like in some ways you have to sacrifice in some areas, or is it one of those things like, now I just have to figure out how to do it all?
You just got to figure out how to do it all. I mean, sorry, I covered you there. I had to plug the phone in. I don't know if we sacrifice. I think we do things differently. I think that
we're a lot more efficient, right?
You have to be.
Oh my gosh.
You have to be efficient.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't get to do, you don't get to do stories that are 6 parts, and sometimes you do. Sometimes certain stories, and I've heard this phrase over and over, and I used to hate it, but now I kind of embrace it. Certain stories lend themselves to certain crews. If it's a big story that is deep, that needs great pictures and great sound and great interviews, and you should send 2, 3, 4 people. If it's just a day of turn and it's not going to be that difficult, then you might go with a photographer, and then that photographer goes and does something else, and I write and I'll edit it, just to kind of make things more efficient. It's just kind of the way of the world. That's just the way it is. And if you can either adapt or you can get out. And I hate to be so crass about it. And it's easy for me because I'm not one man banding all my packages, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. That's not a skill that I ever developed. I shouldn't say I can't. I haven't been asked to do it, and I haven't done it before.
Yeah.
I've done it once or twice, and honestly, it wasn't that terrible. I kind of enjoyed having my own creative freedom, and I had lots of time to do it, but I mean, it's like any other business, everything changes, and either you're in this business because you love to tell stories and you love to purvey information to people, or you're in this business because you just want to be on TV. And those people who just want to be on TV probably don't last for very long, because you have to love what this is. And what we do is bring stories to people at home, and we get to see the coolest things. I get to see the coolest things and be at the coolest places. And then I try to bring that experience whatever way is possible.
Yeah, there's sometimes where you just have to kind of like gut check yourself, like when you're frustrated or you're complaining, you know, I mean, the way anybody will with a job, and be like, let me stop and think about what my job is real quick, because there's a lot of people who come out of college wishing they would do this, and I'm here. And sometimes you have to remind yourself of that.
Yeah, I have my college roommates. One of them is a biochemical engineer. One of them is a doctor. One of them works on Wall Street. I mean, you take my salary for the last decade, and it doesn't add up to 1 year of one. But when we all get together, they want to talk about what I did and what I do, and the Vikings or the Olympics, and there's gut check time. I mean, there is. It's you know, every Sunday of Vikings home games, I start work at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm there till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. At the Olympics, we work 21 straight days, and most of those days start at 8 o'clock in the morning. They don't end until 10 o'clock at night. You know, there's moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna crack.
Mm-hmm.
And you're done with it, but you power through, and then you realize that this is fun, and you just try to live in the moment and know that this still beats sitting behind a desk. It still beats counting beans or digging ditches. It's hard work, but there's a lot of hard work out there. It's a fun way to work hard.
Yeah,
I think.
Help refresh my memory here, but I seem to remember you're in Shreveport, and you basically decided, I'm not going to leave until it's kind of the perfect job, or the job that you feel is perfect for you. And so there were probably other opportunities that came up where you could have jumped and moved, but you decided not to because you were waiting for essentially the job that you got now. I guess when you think back at that, one, am I right there? And then two, kind of what went through your mind? Because you see people who jump quickly, and make a move just to make a move. But what did you learn from, I guess, the thought and the process of just waiting for the right thing?
Well, you're kind. I didn't have like that many offers.
But there probably could have been if you would have applied.
I hope so. I applied for a couple jobs. I got a couple offers, but I wanted to work. I wanted to come back north. I wanted to work somewhere where hockey was big, because I love hockey. And my dream job was always at KARE 11 as far as local news. It's what I wanted to do. And so it was actually a long shot. I just applied, and I ended up getting it, which is one of the great lessons I've always learned, is that if you find a job you like, go for it, because you just never know. You let them decide if they want you before you decide if you want them. Even if you're not sure about it, just try it, because you never know. I think the longer you're in the business, I think the more you owe it to yourself to make sure that it's the right job for you. Because yes, everybody has to pay their dues, and everyone has to do their time. But eventually, if you've done this well enough and long enough, you should be selective and say, okay, you know what? I don't want to go there. I would rather work here or there. And it's got to be the right job, because you work so hard and so long hours, and you're away from your family, that if you're just going somewhere because it's another place, you're just exchanging one set of problems for another, wherever you are now to wherever you're going to go. And I had one or two offers. I think I had another offer in Little Rock. I applied there. It's funny, because I had applied somewhere else and got rejected, and then got, which was a smaller market than KARE 11.
Yeah.
And then got the job at KARE, which shows you just sometimes it's all about, what you crazy news directors are looking for.
Right.
And
right.
Sometimes it's, and it's funny, because sometimes it can be me, or sometimes it's a kid who's fresh out of school. He could get the job over me, because that's just what they're looking for. He or she, I should say. That's just what they're looking for.
Talk about, I guess, getting rejected for a job, or another point in your career where you just feel frustrated, you feel overwhelmed, or you fall flat on an assignment. How important is it to just forget it and bounce back?
You got to keep going. I handle our interns at KARE as well for sports, and I tell them all, they always, the question is always the same thing. Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? No, it's not. The question isn't, is it right? The question is work. Obviously, your information needs to be right, that you've checked it and that you double checked that you have your two sources and all that. But it's much, making news is much more a shade of gray. Can you fit what you need to do in your allotted day and get it to slot on time? If you can do that and there's no factual errors and it's a decent story, then it's right. If you can't, then it's wrong. It doesn't matter how great your stand-up was, that you shot 6 different times in this interview and that interview. If you don't hit slot, it's wrong. You know, you didn't do it right. So you got to keep going, and it's constantly changing. It's constantly throughout the day or whatever you're doing. It's figuring out how to make it work. And I think that's important for you to rely on your specific set of skills that you've learned and put it all together. And it takes time. And that's why you start in small markets and work your way up, so that you can make those mistakes and market whatever I was in Bemidji 217. I didn't think it was a market, but I up so many times there. I'm surprised I stayed employed.
Yeah.
You know, then
there were things we did in Shreveport that I'm surprised, you know.
Right.
And we are now.
Employed, you know, and so you just kind of, you learn all of it. You learn from each mistake, and you learn shortcuts and ways to do things. And so that once you get to a bigger market, you've been through all this already, you know, putting together a story, having a little bit of time, doing a story like this and knowing what kind of characters you want and that kind of thing. They become common to you. So it makes it a little bit easier, and then you're able to do your job efficiently and do it in a timely manner, because that's really what you got to do.
Yeah. And you've worked with a lot of interns, a lot who are real good. You've sent some of them to me. What do you tell, what's your biggest advice for them? What do they need to separate themselves from the other 800 graduates who all want to get into sports?
Ooh, I mean, that's a tough question.
Passion?
Yeah, I tell our interns the same thing. I can't teach you effort. I can teach you how to edit. I can teach you how to shoot. I can teach you how to write. I can teach you how to be on camera. But I can't teach you effort. If you come in every day ready to work, you're read in, so to speak. You've already read the paper. Don't come into the office that day and I need to send you to Twins in 2 minutes and have you go, well, what's going on with them? You need to know. You got to know what's going on. You have to know what's going on, whether it's news, sports, whatever it is. The minute when you get to that 2 o'clock meeting or whatever meeting it is, you should already know what's going on that day. You shouldn't be playing catch up at that point.
Yeah.
And the rest of it can be taught. You can learn all of it, and with time, all of it gets better. But I can't teach passion. I can't teach excitement, and I can't teach effort. And if an intern comes to me with those things, then they're hired. But if you're sitting there in the corner playing on your phone while I'm trying to, get stuff to you, I don't care how good you are. Get out. I'm not interested. And I think that's it. It's hard to put that across in your tapes, but you can do it. And right. If your stand-ups are different, if they have energy, if they show different things, if you're anchoring more than just sitting there reading highlights, but your sportscast looks different, you do it in a certain way that makes it different than someone else's, that at least shows passion and effort, that you care enough to try to take the information and make it an interesting thing to show people at home. And I think that's what's most important, to kind of differentiate yourself. It's do all the things well, but do it in a way that makes it compelling to viewers as best you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I always try to look at, can they do the job? Do they look like they can get better? And do they have the right attitude? Effort and attitude, that's something else that you really can't teach, is attitude. So let's close on this, because back in Shreveport, when we were running the way we were, frustration would set in Shreveport. We felt, we need this to compete. Those sorts of things.
Never frustrated.
Right. Yeah. And I have since learned, obviously, some of those frustrations aren't the end of the world, right? I mean, we have to be able to put those aside and not let them, affect who we are and our outlook on the next day and those sorts of things. And of course, becoming a family man, that will change your priorities and everything. But talk to me about, I guess, how you've been able to develop, you've always been a pretty positive guy, but just the importance of optimism and not letting those frustrations get you down.
Well, I think the most important thing in the newsroom is understanding that it's never personal. Making news is not pretty. Making sports shows are not pretty. You're going to yell at people. You're going to scream at people, and then you can still be friends with them after. It's just like a football game or hockey or anything else. Yes, you're trying to kill that person when you're going, but as soon as the whistle's done, as soon as the 10 o'clock is over, you know what? Everybody has their opinion, and everyone's opinion should be heard, but they're not always going to be used, and that's just the way it goes. And you know what? Whether it was Bemidji, whether it was Shreveport, I remember in Shreveport, I'd always have a producer that I would bang heads with. He'd always try to be cutting my time and telling me how to say,
Hey, you know, news needs a lot of time, buddy.
But you know what? At the end of the day, we're always friends after. And I work with people here in Minnesota that, you know what, we bark at each other sometimes, but we always know that our what we're interested in is the best product. It's not about pushing someone or keeping someone down or lording power over them. It's about what do we need to do to get the best product. And everyone's got a different view of that. And so you have to stay positive. You have to understand that sometimes a viewpoint from somewhere else, not that you didn't think of, is going to be the one that you go with, is going to be the way to go. And you just got to accept that. Sometimes you're going to win the battle. Sometimes you're not. You know, you're going to have a story that's great, that you love, that you put your heart and soul into, and it's 40 seconds longer than that producer is going to give you. So you got to cut it. And that's when it gets real. That's gut check time. And and if you're working with a photographer, you're not going to like it. But rather than waste your time fighting about it, 10 o'clock's coming, so you better start cutting. And that's going to happen. And it's not personal. It's not anything. But there comes a point in time, and this is a hard lesson to learn. There comes a point in time where you got to realize the fight's over. You got to just go, you know what? I lost.
Right.
Another day, let's just move on and go. And we've had that. I've had that problem here with some younger people the younger photographers that I've worked with. And I know a specific example where we had this great story and it was like 45 seconds too long. And he's fighting with our producer. And I finally just said, listen, we lost. There's nothing we can do about it. We lost. We'll win next time. Let's just make this the best we can and move on. And that's all we can do. And sometimes you got to realize that you may not win the battle, but you can win the war another day. And as long as the product is still the same, then you let it go. There are some times where you can dig your heels in the mud and say, no, this has got to be it. But you got to figure out when those times are. And if you try to make every time like that, you'll never win. No one will ever listen to you if every time you're going all the way with it. So you got to learn when to back off and just have fun. We're not digging ditches. We're not working at drive-thrus and flipping burgers. It's not a bad life. It's a good time.
Yeah, that's a good point. At the end of this, the frustrations, the long hours, the 24/7 lifestyle, it is fun and it needs to be fun. So Dave, appreciate
you either work to live or you work to live or you live to work. And,
yep.
And I think in this industry, we live to work. You know, we don't work to live. We live to work here. And that's why there is no 9 to 5. There is no off. You just keep going.
Yep. Appreciate the time, man.
Anytime for you, the great Austin Kellerman. I mean, let me tell you.
All right.